I speak to you in the name of God who opens the eyes of the blind. Amen. Please be seated. Good morning. Good morning. I'm so glad to be with you this morning for the Dylan Mass. I have heard about it for almost the entirety of the time I've been with you at St. James's. Last year, at about this time, I had just moved here from Minnesota and was unpacking my house and scooted into this service without people really knowing who I was. But it's really fun to get to be here up front, knowing this community makes this worship service even that much more fun and powerful. On Thursday night, we hosted the second of our interfaith dialogue series this year with Beth Ahava. So the clergy and some folks from Beth Ahava met with some folks from St. James's in Valentine Hall. We had a really nice dinner, and then we talked about the calendar and the seasons and holy days and symbols and sort of rhythm of life in both the Jewish and Christian traditions. During our question and answer portion of the evening, a man asked the rabbi this question. We had just talked about how the Jewish festival of Purim starts a time of sort of introspection and just self-examination that then culminates with Passover. And we had talked about how most years that pretty much overlaps with Lent, or I guess I should say Lent overlaps with that season for our Jewish brothers and sisters. And so we were sort of talking about this idea that one of the connective pieces of both of our faith traditions is that we are called to times of contemplation and examination, to times where we are intentionally really thoughtful about who we are and who we are in relationship to God, but then also about who we are in relationship to our communities and to the world around us. And so this man asked a question of the rabbi. He said, so in the Jewish tradition, during that time, is it just about sort of personal work of you yourself with God, or is it also about your relationships with other people? And the rabbi answered in a way that made my heart happy, because it was exactly what I, as a Christian priest and pastor, would have said, which is that for people of faith, we don't just wear that identity like a name tag. We don't pick up our name tags on Sunday morning and sort of put on our Christian identity, and then when we leave church and we put our name tags away, that identity leaves us. That who we are in our baptism, in our life as members of God's beloved community, that who we are is who we are all the time. Like, I'm always a priest, I'm always also a mom, a sister, a daughter. We all have all of those identities that we live with and that exude from us all of the time. And so when the rabbi sort of answered that there was no way to disconnect one's life of faith from then one's relationships with others and with the world, I felt like that resonated deeply with me. I then jokingly reminded the group, I said, all right, St. Jamesers, for any of you who were wondering, we as Christians believe that too, that we are always disciples. We are always followers of Christ. And during Lent, we're not only called to that time of self-examination and contemplation and intentionality for ourselves and our relationship with God, but we are indeed called to be intentional as we think about our communities, our neighborhoods, and the world around us. In this morning's gospel, we hear that the man was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him, and that then Jesus makes mud, He rubs it onto the man's eyes, tells him to go wash in the pool, and then the blind man is healed. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We are all born something so that God's works might be revealed in us. I want you to hold that as we dwell in this morning's gospel. That then when the man was asked who it was whose eyes had been opened, he said, "I am the man." And then he had to tell that story over and over. The Pharisees took issue with the fact that Jesus healed the man on the Sabbath. And what we hear in this dialogue is a theological argument, a theological debate between the Pharisees in and amongst themselves, but then also they turn to this man who has been blind. They turn to a man who has been a beggar ever since he was young. They turn to a man who moments before meant nothing to them, to tell them about what had happened and to tell them about who Jesus is. He says, if this man were not from God, he could do nothing. And that is what convinces the Pharisees that indeed Jesus is from God, and indeed he is the one who has done this miraculous thing. This man was blind from birth, born from sin, the Pharisees say. But Jesus then says, I come into this world so that those who do not see will see, and that those who see will become blind. In other words, Jesus says, I come to reverse everything about the order of this world that you know. I come to make right all of the things about the way we live that are wrong, right. I come to bring light and life and abundance rather than judgment and discrimination. I come for everyone. I come for even those who were so unimportant to you that you didn't even notice them. And yet with me and through me, they are now telling you about who God is. During this season of Lent, we are called, like I said, to that time of self-examination and contemplation. And these Lenten Gospels, each and every week, tell us something about what the abundant life that God promises us looks like. Today's Gospel tells us that the abundant life that Jesus calls us to and has created for us requires us to have our eyes be opened, requires us to look around and take stock not just of ourselves and who we are in our relationship with God and with those who immediately surround us, but to be broader in our thinking, to take stock of the systems that we participate in that do harm rather than bring life, to take stock of the institutions and norms, the status quos that continue to separate and divide rather than to heal and restore. During this season of Lent, we are called to have our eyes open and be willing to acknowledge what we see. We are called to see the truth, to see the light, to be the people, like Ephesians tells us, who were once in darkness, but now in the Lord have become light. For the fruit of that light is found in all that is good and right and true. We are to take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. Those are pretty heavy words for us to take on. And I am not suggesting that we gather in some mob to collectively protest something, though maybe if that's what some of you discern, we will do. But what I'm really suggesting is that we live more truthfully when we see the world around us, that we are willing to acknowledge the places in which salvation does not seem to be open and offered to all people, that we acknowledge that even systems and institutions that we love are broken, and that we as people of faith whose eyes have been opened, we are called to do the work of changing those systems for the good. There's no scorched earth policy here, right? Everything is worth redeeming. Everything has the possibility of new life and new creation. We are called to do that work in our communities and in our institutions and in our systems so that God's light and love might become more available to more folks in this world. Our question this morning that we might ask is, how might God's works be revealed to us through the people and things that this world tells us have no value? Who are those blind beggars in our peripheral vision that we haven't yet acknowledged? And what revelation might they help us name? Like that blind man, may our eyes be open to see the world as Jesus would have us see it, to believe in the potential that in this world there can be abundant life for all, that God's works will be revealed in unexpected ways, and that we are called to be people who live with eyes open to see and proclaim God's presence among us. As we look at the world around us through the eyes of our faith, what looks different? Perhaps that is our Lenten question today. Amen.